We will first have a keynote by Pierre Schellekens. He's the Director for Energy Policy Strategy Coordination at the European Commission, DG ENER. Topic is EU strategy towards a CO2-free European energy sector.
So, as you know, it's been a historically busy period for energy policy as a whole. This last mandate, the mandate of the von der Leyen Commission, we started off, of course, with the Green Deal, with a very strong focus then on legislation, the Fit for 55 package, the 2030 targets, the different instruments towards 2030, and then came Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the energy crisis linked to it, linked to the fact that Russia was weaponizing its energy exports to the EU. Historically high energy prices in the summer of 2022 and also the autumn of 2022 and over winter, but of course also a rather strong and resolute action by the EU. And when I talk about the EU, I talk more generally. I don't always only talk about Brussels. Yes, there was a strong sign of solidarity here in the Council of Ministers with the member states, but it was equally important that the member states took actions, that a big part of European industry and private sector took actions. And I think we underestimate also the impact of many decisions taken at regional and local level that actually helped us through the crisis, because we had high prices, that's true, but we never had any real blackouts, and we managed to all the time ensure security of supply. It does mean, however, that over this period, part of the industry, of the European industry, has suffered and is still suffering. We still have energy prices that are 3 to 4 times higher, some days 5 times higher than the US, for industry, I mean. And of course, 2 to 3 times higher than China. The prices have come down significantly. You remember that in August 2022, we were up to 330, 340 euros per megawatt hour for the wholesale prices of gas. We are now at 39 this morning. It's a huge difference, but it still is a big gap towards our main competitors. The situation also is, of course, that many during this crisis, you will have heard the same voices saying that now that we were in this energy crisis, we absolutely needed to stop, or at least to put between brackets, to temporarily halt all our climate ambitions. That was a very, very conscious choice done by the Commission and the member states to rather accelerate the energy transition, because we see the energy transition both as a geopolitical tool. It is about producing our energy to the extent possible at home. And of course, in addition to the fact that if we are really going to bring down prices in the medium and long term, you cannot build on fossil fuels. So that is So there was a very conscious choice, beyond, of course, the climate ambitions, to go for an acceleration of the transition. That's when we proposed to raise the level of ambition for renewables, energy efficiency, and they were then negotiated and agreed by the Parliament and the Council. We are now in a phase where we are not struggling in any meaningful way with our security of supply. The situation looks pretty stable in terms of security of supply, including for this winter. And there I talk about, of course, about the EU market. There is a huge challenge not to support Ukraine. Russia has been very consciously targeting energy infrastructure. You all know that. there is a gap, and we will need to put all the efforts we can in supporting Ukraine through this winter. And here, within the context of the EU, we are, of course, now really addressing as a priority the energy prices and what we can do short, medium, long term to have an impact on the energy prices. So in 2 weeks' time, the Commissioner designate for energy, Dan Jørgensen, will be going to the Parliament for his hearing. We are, of course, preparing this. Mr. Jørgensen is giving us his instructions, his guidelines, and we are providing him with information. And it's pretty clear that already when President von der Leyen was in Parliament in July, she spelled out the fact that the first initiative of this new commission would be the Clean Industrial Deal. So a focus on the situation of European industry, certainly not a change of orientation, but a change maybe on the fact that we are committed to our transition goals, 2030, but of course also 2050 in terms of climate neutrality. This, we stay on track, but we need to make sure that we do this with industry, and that the good way, or the right way of meeting climate targets is not simply to stop emissions from industry because they are no longer there. So we want to have an industry, and we want to meet our climate targets. And I think this is also a huge shift also in European industry. If you look at the Antwerp Declaration from January, you have there most of the big European companies giving their view on how we could meet the targets in a quicker and more cost-efficient way. The Antwerp Declaration in no way says we have to stop climate policy or we should not be doing this. They are saying facilitate permitting for renewables, build grids, ensure investments in the energy transition, all of which we, of course, in the Commission completely agree with. So these are issues that will be part of any document called the Clean Industrial Deal, and that is going to come in the first 100 days of the new mandate. Linked to that, you will have an action plan on affordable energy that we are preparing, looking again into all these bottlenecks, such as the infrastructure investments, in the context where access to capital has become more expensive than when we modeled all of this for 2030. The whole issue of grids, where it's obvious that if you are talking about an electricity system which by 2030 is likely to be composed by not far from 70% renewables, today's grids are in no way capable of managing that. The need to look at demand response in a completely different way, the need to do this in a technological neutral way. In all our modeling, nuclear has a role to play in the electricity system of the future. What we see in front of us is that the power system is basically decarbonized by 2040, not at 2050. 50, when we talk climate neutrality, we talk about the energy system and the economy as a whole. For 2040, most projections, actually nearly all projections we have, indicate a full decarbonization of the electricity system, which would then see, of course, also a very, very strong increase of electricity as an energy carrier. So you would have a bulk of it, and the bulk of this increase is, of course, renewables. The bulk of this increase is not nuclear. I don't think the nuclear sector claims it itself that most of this is nuclear, but you have the bulk of this increase is renewables. You find yourself at the level of 80-85% by 2040, but then there is a complement of nuclear in those member states that choose to have it. And we're never going to tell them that they can't, and we're never going to tell them that they must. It's as simple as that. And then, of course, an interest, and I know this is one of your topics, an interest and now I would say an increasing political initiative and together with industry on the SMRs, the potential of SMRs. We can't let this technology go past Europe. We have to be there on SMRs. Of course, it's still rather early days, not as early as a couple of years ago, but it's still rather early days. But we need to make sure that we don't that we sit on that train as well, yeah, and see what the potential is. As always in these contexts, it's difficult to give you an exact figure and so forth, but there is certainly something to be examined, assessed, and a potential that has an interesting contribution. Again, not the silver bullet that will solve our climate policy, but certainly an interesting contribution to this, as all other forms of technology. I stop here. It's 20 past. I think I've been, by my standards, surprisingly short, and and more than happy to take questions.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was really short and to the point. Beautiful. So the question about questions. So we would have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 5 minutes or maybe even more for questions. Yeah. So
I have until past, so go ahead.
Yeah, so even 11 minutes. Yeah. So if you want to ask questions, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Or
I would have a question. So raising my hand.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Martin from Kellogg's. We are heading the energy trading business here. I would have one question. First of all, thanks for the great overview of what's going to happen and what the plan is. You were speaking about affordable energy, and my question would be, what are the technologies in renewables that you see behind that? Is it a mix? Is it like certain technologies that are actually sticking out a bit more? So that would be my question.
Yeah, listen, Martin, on I think your question is a good question, because you might argue what on earth is affordable energy? It depends very much who you are. It depends which industry you are. I mean, as you know, big parts of European industry have not suffered at all during this energy crisis. There are big parts of the European industry where we do not see production going down over the last 2 or 3 years, and that is simply because they don't use that much energy. Right? We have an advantage of having an industrial sector that tends to be more energy efficient than its main competitors, which is a very, very good thing, and which has historically helped us to compensate for some of that gap with the US. But today, that gap is so big that energy efficiency is no longer sufficient to compensate for that gap. What we mean by affordable, of course, is to make sure that energy prices or energy costs, because to some extent, energy costs is the more accurate term, that energy costs do not hamper European competitiveness. I'm the first one to say that competitiveness is much more than the price. Competitiveness is also your capacity to innovate. It's your capacity, it's the quality of your workforce, the skills of your workforce. All of that is competitiveness. But one important aspect, in particular for the energy intensive industry, and for them it's a very important aspect, is of course the price of your energy. So I would define it, and I say this as my own view because I think we're going to work more on that in the Commission. But I would define it as a situation where I would never say where energy prices are the same all around the world. I mean, forget it. But where this is no longer a major stumbling block for the competitors of European economy. That is where I would say we go. What does that mean in terms of renewables? It's pretty, as I said, it's pretty clear on the electricity side. Yeah, but we are going to face a complete new set of issues, I think. This year, until now, 2024, if you take all the hours since midnight of the 31st of December 2023, if you take all the hours that have gone by since then, in Europe, on the EU market rather, we have had negative prices, electricity prices, in 5.5%. Last year, that was 2.2%, and the year before it was 0.5%. So when I say these figures, many people say 5.5%, that's nothing. You will understand it's a very, very strong increase of negative electricity prices on the European market. And that is the impact of renewables, primarily. Of course, we managed to control demand and so forth, but that is the variability of the renewable contribution to the electricity system. Now, all of that is going to increase. That is going to increase year by year. And then we will come in a situation where we have to ask ourselves, okay, how is it still interesting to invest in this? So we will need to think about how we set prices, what we mean by energy costs. Today, as you know, the wholesale prices are only a share of the retail prices. We talk about the system cost, the network charges, the taxation, and so forth. That is an element where you need to start thinking and integrating those notions so that you really make sure that industry and households benefit from renewables. By the way, this is also where I think popular support, which is not very low either for renewables, but you see some resistance in some areas for renewables, would also have an impact when households see actually that the renewables are really putting them in a complete different situation in terms of disposable income, compared to what it was 2022 and 2023. It means that, for the electricity sector is pretty clear. By the way, these kind of problems are it's not a problem because it's a luxury problem, but these kind of challenges we are already seeing, by the way, in the Nordic countries and in the Iberian Peninsula. It's going to come a bit later in countries like Germany or France, or especially in Central and Eastern Europe. But on the Nordic market and on the Iberian market, you're pretty much there in these kind of issues. And you see a very, very strong variable. Take the prices on Nord Pool. The variability is very strong. Huh?
Yes, absolutely.
But they, generally speaking, have lower prices than, for instance, the continental market. So Nord Pool has low prices for the moment, compared to the rest of Europe. For the total energy system, there you would need to make sure that by 2050, it's pretty much decarbonized as well. You will still have some emissions in 2050, but these will have to be limited to what you can say is our natural emissions. So that would be some emissions linked to agriculture, and that then are compensated by negative emissions, either by the normal sink or by technologies for capture. And you already see now in some member states appearing projects, basically being financed already, with mixing biomass with carbon capture. And that is interesting because suddenly you find yourself in a plant for providing heat and which has negative emissions. So that is you see it in Stockholm, you see it in Oslo. These projects coming up that would then compensate, but it means also, for instance, that in the transport sector you need to go to -90, -95. Same the housing sector, basically zero. I think that's possible, but it means a huge increase of investments. It is really an investment. Like somebody once told me when I was saying, "Isn't this very ambitious at targets?" No target is too ambitious. It's only a question of if you can liberate the necessary amount of investments. And that, of course, is still I think one of our main challenges.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you also for the good question. We have two questions now. So the first one from Robert. If you could just please post your question, just state your name and the company, and then Yvonne would be next, and we try to still do it.
Robert David from Interprint. Short question. You shortly spoke about the grid. Are there any plans to accelerate the reformation of the grid, which is definitely necessary if we're talking about renewable energies and energy storages, in a way that it has not a big impact on the total energy prices? I mean, we are talking about pricing for the harvesting of the energy, but more and more grows the costs of the grids.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Maybe I take Yvonne's question at the same time, and then afterwards I reply to these two. Is that okay,
Okay.
Ingo? And then I need to
definitely, yeah. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, to leave you. Yeah. Yvonne.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think access to funding is a very crucial point, that we get these technologies implemented across the market. You already said that huge investments needed, no? And from our experience, there is a lot of funding money available, but it's quite hard and sometimes intransparent how to get access to these funds, especially if they are distributed via the member states, like modernization fund programs. It takes a very long time, and it's not always easy to find the right information, and then also to have the projects prepared in time that you can access this money. So it would be very helpful if there would be some movement to make this process more transparent and also faster, to ensure that this money can in a timely manner help the transition.
Listen, on that question, I think first of all you're right when you say actually there's no lack of capital in Europe. Then I speak mainly about the whole financial system. You're talking about what was the last figure I heard? 140 trillion euros. So there's no lack of capital. We have a system in Europe which is less investment prone than, for instance, in the US. You know that Europeans tend to save money much more. They have a much higher saving ratio than other developed economies. But there are other reasons as well. And when we look at the investments, of course there will be public money, but fundamentally it's private money, right? So we're talking about 85-90% of these investment costs is private money. What we need to make sure is that we use the public money in the best possible way. We are going into a difficult budgetary period at EU level, but also in many member states. You see the debates on deficits even in Germany, but also of course in France and so forth. So we're going into a difficult period, and that's why we really need to make sure that we get as much bang for our bucks. So what we are looking for is tools, de-risking tools. We need to be more clever in what kind of financial instruments we use for different types of investments. It's obvious, for instance, that support to innovative renewables is not necessarily the same financial tool as support to grids, right? Or hydrogen, where a lot of it is making sure there is sufficient offtake. So it's very different. We have tended to be a bit like all about grants and so forth, and there I think we need to look at the leverage effects and mobilizing more private money by using public money. And that is, I think, what will be. We do intend to come up next year with an investment strategy. Any ideas in that context are more than welcome. So there will be a clean investment strategy, and we can certainly take input to that. And that will be presented probably next year as part, also as a follow-up to the clean industrial deal. On grids, I could not agree more. So many issues. First of all, how do we use the existing grid? It's obvious that we don't use it in a perfectly optimal way. So there is one avenue of action. Another action is what you're hinting at, is how do we make it financially interesting to invest in grids without meaning that all the consumers or the industry have to pay much more, because otherwise there's a tendency to just pass it on. And how do you reform partly also the legislation, increase the compatibility, standardization across both for products, but also to facilitate cross-border usage of the grids, because as you know, we still are very far from where we should be in using the cross-border capacity as well. So these are some avenues of thought. You will see some of these avenues in the Clean Industrial Deal, and in particular in the action plan on affordable energy. There we will spell this out, and we will take that down to a more concrete level when we come with a clean investment strategy. I hope this has replied to your questions.
Yeah, super.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.